Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Royals Rundown podcast presented by Royals Review. I am Jacob Milham, per usual, joined by the one and only in Spags We Trust fan club leader, Jeremy Hakayas Greco.
Oh,
Jeremy, happy Sunday.
I think that's Justin Reed. I'm pretty sure that
You think so?
that's not me.
I don't know. I think it's you.
If Spags joins the Raiders this offseason as their new head coach, do I get to keep wearing the shirt or do I need to retire it?
You need to retire.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Jeremy. There's only one good way to go about it. And there's only one good way to go about this Sunday, and that is to have a guest on. You may know him from many, many moons ago, Greg Walker. Greg, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be back. Here we are in the nadir of the baseball offseason, really. There's just so much going on. All sorts of things we can talk about.
Somebody's been playing with their thesaurus again.
Oh, man. Just wait until the alliterations start up again, everyone. We are ready to hear it over here. But, hey, you can read Greg's alliterations only at royalsreview.com, where you can keep up to date on all things Royals related, the Royals rumblings every single morning, news, analysis. I know Jared Perkins still has his prospect lists coming out, so tune in for that. Also, if you need some more college baseball insight, Greg has a wonderful podcast about that. Greg, can you tell our listeners about your podcast?
Show, Flips and Infield Shifts. You can listen to it wherever you're listening to this podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, etc. The college baseball season is starting about a month from now, and so we are getting into our season previews, going conference by conference. I can promise you're not going to find a more in-depth season preview series for college baseball, probably anywhere on the podcast scene. And so if you're interested in getting to know some of the guys who are going to be playing in Power 4 teams now, rest in peace to the Pac-12. But if you're interested in that, you can go check it out at Flips and Infield Shifts. And, this actually did inspire me to put together this quick game. And I'm going to start you out here with, I call this game a college baseball player or a Star Wars Extended Universe character. And so I've got 5 names for each of you. I'm just going to give you this name, and you have to try to tell me if this is an ACC baseball player or a character from the extended Star Wars universe. So who would like to start us off?
All right.
Jeremy, you start, man.
All right, Jeremy, we're starting off with one Rom Kellis.
That's a baseball player.
He is a baseball player for the University of North Carolina. He's a JUCO transfer with a good hit tool. So Jeremy is 1 for 1. Congratulations. Moving over to Jacob, I give you Kane Kepley. That is actually also an outfielder for the University of North Carolina.
Dang it.
Coming off of 2 very strong seasons for Liberty. So Jeremy is ahead. Moving on to one Galen Urso, Jeremy.
That's the Star Wars character.
That is the father of the main protagonist in Rogue One, an Imperial engineer that planted the weakness in the Death Star exploited by the rebels. Jacob Thorpe Muskie.
What?
Yeah, he is a freshman pitcher for Georgia Tech with a 92 to 95 mile per hour fastball. All right, you're on the board, Jacob. Back to Jeremy. We got Timo Becerra.
Well, that's a baseball player for sure.
He's been around Stanford for quite a while. Veteran, middle infielder, glove first type, does not hit much. Jeremy knows his ACC baseball, obviously.
Apparently so.
I know my EU character names is what I know.
Jacob, we've got Kento Merrick.
He's a
Knight
right?
of the Jedi Order, the father of the player character in Star Wars The Force Unleashed. He was killed by Darth Vader. Back to Jeremy, we got Cassius Thomas.
That's a baseball player.
He is a baseball player. He pitches for Stanford. Last year, hitting .931 out of the bullpen with more walks than strikeouts. The Stanford bullpen was a pretty big problem last year. He is kind of reflective.
No one in Star Wars has ever been named Thomas.
Wait, there could be a first. You never know. I mean, their most iconic character is named Luke. So, I mean, the names can be pretty ordinary.
Yeah, but Skywalker.
Touche. Back to Jacob. We got Brenso Waters.
Give me Star Wars
Waters
character.
Is a baseball player. He is a freshman for Notre Dame, a left-handed hitting DH type.
Wow,
no
okay.
Star Wars character has ever been named Waters either.
This is Jeremy's last name now. Let's see if you can go 5 for 5. We got Balin Skull.
Yeah.
Balin Skull.
I'm gonna say baseball
Ooh,
player.
so close. He is a Star Wars character.
Dang,
A
as
lightsaber
soon as I was saying it, I'm like, no, this is
Balen
wrong.
Skoll is a lightsaber-wielding mercenary that appears in the series Ahsoka.
Didn't
All right,
watch
Jacob,
that
I don't
one.
think you can win this at this point, but let's close out strong.
heck no.
Williff Tarkin, baseball player or Star Wars character?
Dang it. Oh, that's
It is
Star Wars
also
character?
better known as Grand Moff Tarkin, a high-ranking Imperial military officer, one of the main antagonists in the original Star Wars film, and has since appeared in the Clone Wars and Rogue One. So, there you go. Jeremy
All
knows
right.
his Star Wars
Jeremy,
Extended
smoke
Universe
me on that.
characters. And or his ACC baseball.
Those aren't even the Star Wars Extended Universe characters I know. I just know how Star Wars characters get named.
Ah, you know the
It's
style
random
of
syllables.
it. I love it.
If it sounds like it could be a name, it's not a Star Wars name.
That Waters one really got me,
Yeah.
Greg. I
thought
gonna lie.
the
I was just
UNC
like,
outfield
this is just
having a
simple
duo
enough.
of Rom Kellis and Kane Kepley were two very Star Wars names for one outfield.
I mean, if you handed those to me back to back and said these are smuggler duo in Star Wars, I'd
Yeah.
like, yeah,
I
sure.
could buy and Timo Becerra. That's a Star Wars name, but you nailed that one.
See, that made me think of Tino Martinez, maybe, or one of those Tinos. I think is where I got that from. I swear there's been another baseball player named Timo, but I can't think of who it
None
was.
come to mind for me.
Timo Perez.
What is
Isn't it Timo
Strangers?
Perez?
What is Strangers? Stanford being in the ACC or Star Wars names?
I mean Stanford being in the
let's be real.
ACC is dumber. I'll go with that.
Yeah, I will agree with that. All right, listen, we do have a little bit of Royals news at least to cover today. Not too much on the rumors front for the Royals or anything like that. Like we said, it's been pretty slow for most
They busted
teams. What did you say?
They busted me. They did not get their bat.
No, they did not. They did not get their bat. They didn't get anything really.
But
they are getting their bat.
2 utility infielders, including a super utility infielder and a starting pitcher. So I feel like I was close.
I do just want to say that the super utility player thing is not a designation that like writers are coming up with. This is what the team is calling Gavin Biggio, super utility player. Now, can he play any one of those positions competently? That is a whole
on a
other
scale
discussion.
Of 1 to 10 parsecs, Greg, how excited are you for super utility man Gavin Biggio?
Like a 4 at best. I mean, it's a minor league deal. It's a guy that was
not quite.
He played for 3 teams in 2024. It wasn't particularly good for any of them, and so just because the team announces him as super utility doesn't make him better. I mean, the team also announced Trevor Warner as a 2-way player when they drafted him. So the way that they announce their acquisitions isn't really necessarily important.
No.
Where is the line between super utility player and just a utility player? Like, do we have a stance on that?
There used to be a line, and that line was a Ben Zobrist or Whit Merrifield, who was a starter in terms of skill, who played multiple positions. That line no longer exists.
I mean, Biggio did play 4 different positions in the majors last year, so there is that 3 spots on the infield, all of them except for shortstop and some right field. So I don't know, where do you draw the line? Like,
but what was he good at? Any one of them?
It's hard to say because he didn't really play much. But no, this is what the small sample says.
Fair. Like I remember, Merrifield was a Gold Glover at second base and in the outfield. Like he was a super utility player. The same thing with Zobrist when he was with the Rays.
Win a Gold Glove in the outfield, did he?
He was I mean he was Gold Glove caliber at those positions.
I don't think he was that good, but you could have your opinion.
I could be wrong. You could be wrong. It's all opinions, right?
I've never been
Merrifield
wrong.
was a very good second baseman. He honestly shouldn't have even been a utility player. He should have just been a second baseman. His bat didn't play it right.
Yeah, probably so. No, it really didn't. But alas, they tried to make it happen for some odd reason.
What happens when you don't have a roster?
Yeah. Listen, we love the term talent deficiency around here, and those years of the Royals were certainly deficient in talent. So, folks, the only real news this past week from the Royals front is they announced their non-roster invitees
Ooh.
for MLB spring training this year. Plenty of prospect power up on the front here. Of course, the big headline was Jack Caglione getting the call. Will be joining the big league club in Arizona. A few other top 30 guys that you should know about. Carter Jensen is getting the call. Blake Mitchell is as well. Steven Zobak, Chandler Champlain are a couple of pitchers you should know. Then also Gavin Cross and John Rave, two outfielders that Royals fans have loved to talk about this
I can't believe
offseason,
Rave is
are
still on the
there.
roster, like still in the Royals minors. I feel like somebody should have taken a shot at him in the Rule 5 or something.
Probably so. Greg, are looking over the full list, was there anyone that you were like surprised by? Anyone you were surprised that wasn't on the list? Or is this just kind of an NRI list that you would expect?
It's more or less what I would expect, although I do think it's interesting that Blake Mitchell is getting an invite just because, he's only 20. He's not going to be 21 until August. And he finished last season at high A. And only 5 games there. And so there's really no shot that he breaks camp with the team, right? And so it is at least a little bit surprising that he's going to be at big league spring training, given that he had like a 30% K rate at low A last year.
See, I think it's not about Blake Mitchell getting a shot for the big league roster. It's about saying, hey, big guy prospect that we really like, here's the show. We give you a little peek. I mean, that's what they're doing with Jack Caglione. And also at spring training, every catcher gets invited to big league spring training to start with because they just have so many pitchers they want to see.
Yeah. I mean, like Kyle Hayes was another catcher that they invited. I mean, he's 27 years old. Yeah, exactly. He was like the one name on that
put
list.
On the catching gear, the tools of ignorance, as they're called, just so he can catch a couple pitchers.
Hey, we might shift him back behind the plate. Can't go much worse than it has in the outfield, I guess. But yeah, they always seem to call up a bunch of catchers and pitchers for the camp. I did see folks complaining about them only calling up 2 outfielders, and I think people are number one, overestimating that there's a savior on the farm in the outfield, but number 2, also underestimating the sheer amount of outfielders that are on the Royals 40-man roster right now. Like, it's easy to forget about Tyler Gentry and Drew Waters and Nelson Velasquez, all because they're pretty forgettable at the MLB level.
Hunter Renfro's still around too. Yeah. Let's go year 2.
Greg,
is this the year that MJ Melendez turns the corner?
Why'd you have to bring it down? No.
Is he going to still play left field every day?
I don't think it is. No,
Greg,
I would hope not.
Antagonizing. I don't understand.
It's dispiriting when a team is coming off their first postseason appearance in 9 years and still has very obvious holes on the roster they're not really doing anything to address.
We got a month, baby. Yeah. We got a month.
Well, I really hope that. I mean, what the only player to note that they signed after they announced the NRI list was like Adam Frazier last year. Like, can we have a better acquisition than Adam Frazier?
But this offseason has been different for the Royals. They made a whole bunch of all their signings were in December last year. This year they're waiting guys out a little bit more. I still, the people who know these things, especially David Lesky, assure me that there will be another bat. And I have to believe that there will be, because as we talked about, they kind of said $120 million was kind of the minimum. Well, that was what they said they were going to spend. And as we've kind of discussed, you don't say that unless you're going to spend at least that much, because otherwise you look like a liar or an idiot or, whatever, something not good. And they're currently at like 112, I think, after all of their arbitration cases where they did settle with everyone. So none of those will actually go to arbitration. That did happen also. We forgot to mention that.
Oh yeah, shoot. I completely forgot about that.
I forgot about it until just right now. But yeah, so they got to spend some more money. They said they were going to get 2 bats. They haven't done that yet. It's got to happen, or else they're going to get blasted, not just by us, not just by Royals Review, but by like the Star. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Andy Rogers even had like a mildly critical piece in the MLB news. So it's going to happen. And there's too many. The other thing is there are so many good players out there still. There was that article that was like more than half of the top 50 free agents are still unsigned.
Which is insane.
They gotta sign. They gotta play. You can't have half the top 50 just not play in 2025.
Yeah. Right. I mean, Greg,
that happens, there's collusion.
Greg, where are you sitting at with this whole free agency, like how it's progressed so far this
I will
offseason?
say, as the offseason has progressed, that deal they made for Michael Wacha very early on has looked like a bargain given the rates that pitching is going
Yeah.
for, especially starting pitching. I mean, guys that were not very good last year have been getting similar deals, and Michael Wacha generally outperformed them. And so, compared to like what Luis Severino got, for example, like that looks like a steal. Now, as far as the bats, you're right, there are still options out there. It's just hard to really see a good fit because there isn't really a third baseman out there, which is probably the biggest need on the roster. And any corner outfield types, because right field has been a black hole for the Royals since like, I don't know, 2002, basically. So I don't see them fixing that because they're probably not going to get Santander, just because I think they prioritize their outfield defense a little bit more than that. And he's not really much of a defender, especially out and right. I don't know, like nobody seems to want Pete Alonso. Like I know that they have Vinny Pasquantino and
Apparently
Salvador
not.
Not on the
Perez on the
money he
roster, but
wants.
still, like toss a 3 or 4 year deal at him. Why not?
I think that, and the Royals signaled this early on, and I have no reason to doubt this. I think that the bat is coming by trade. And so some of what they're waiting for is for those free agents to get signed so teams can say, oh, well, we don't need this guy anymore. So say the Angels go get a Pete Alonso. They're like, well, we need to move our DH into the outfield, or, we can part with somebody now, whatever that looks like, or somebody signed Santander, one of their outfielders needs to come off the roster. And that's kind of, I think, maybe what the Royals are waiting for, is to pick up what will be somebody, and not exciting, obviously. You're like, well, why don't you get Santander? They're not going to pay for him. Could they pay for him? Yes, they're not gonna. Okay. So then we hope that whoever they're, somebody's fourth outfielder that they trade for ends up being still pretty good. And it's still going to be, whoever it is will end up being an upgrade. If it's somebody like a Taylor Ward, who's, a league average starter, that's still significantly better than the below average starter the Royals have been putting in the corner outfield spots. So I still think that there's room to hope. I think that we got a little maybe ahead of ourselves, hoping for a Profar or a Santander or a Teoscar Hernandez at the beginning of the offseason. But I do think that there can be somebody of at least moderate quality to be had via trade once those guys sign.
So we brought up Santander a lot already. So I do want to preface or pose this to you, Greg. There's been reports that with Pete Alonso putting a short-term contract on the table for the New York Mets, that Santander would be willing to do the same on a higher annual salary. You have a short-term contract with some opt-outs, some more player flexibility. Would you want the Royals to pay Santander, say, like, I don't know, 25, 30 million in 2025 on a
I'll
short-term
admit,
deal?
I'm not necessarily that into Santander. I don't really think he's a great fit for the ballpark offensively or defensively. There's just some things going on with his overall profile that I'm not a big fan of. And so if he comes over here from the AL East, I'm not super bullish. The guy's turning 30. And so it would depend on just how long the deal is. If it's like a 2 or 3 year deal, then I'm okay with that generally. But I can understand why teams haven't been willing to pay like 7,160 or something for him.
Okay, Jeremy, what say you?
I mean, yeah, pretty much in the same. Honestly, this is what I always say, but this is what I will continue to say. If they sign Santander, he's an improvement over what they have now. And I don't care how much money they spend on him, because it's not
There we
my
go.
money. And they
There
can
you go.
afford it. It's whether they choose to spend the money. It's not a matter of whether they have the money. They do. They have the money. I was looking up money stuff to be like, I was trying to figure out, because I've been talking about, if the A's are bringing in that 70 million in revenue sharing, I was trying to figure out, are the Royals getting that same amount? And I wasn't able to find that, but I was able to find several reports, and they're not substantiated in any way, that suggest that the Royals are getting at least that much in revenue sharing. And then you've got the national TV deals, which we never talk about how much money comes from the national TV deals, but it looks like several dozen million. And then the local TV deal is going to go down from 50, but it can't go down that much, or they wouldn't have signed it. So maybe you lose 10 or 15 from that, but you're going to gain a whole bunch of money in increased attendance this year from having made the postseason last year. And if you field a good roster this year, so the money is there. The money is always there. They're not spending it. If they chose to spend it on Santander, I don't know that I would say that was the best use of that money, but I'm not sure how else you're gonna improve the raw. I mean, through free agency, it's Santander or bust, kind of. I mean, it's Santander or Profar, and Santander is probably a better look than Profar given age and
Maybe
recent
so.
history. So I know Profar looked really good last year. I'm a big fan of Profar, but he's not. I mean, he's getting old, and he had a really bad year before he had a really good year last year. So if they want to sign Santander, it improves the roster, and I don't care what it costs, but I don't think they will, and I don't think it would be in a vacuum a good investment
The other
necessarily.
issue with an Alonso or a Santander is that they got the qualifying offer, and so you're giving up a draft pick plus whatever
Yeah.
pool space is associated with that for signing him. And for a team like the Royals that kind of needs to have guys that they draft and develop in order to sort of make things work, like you don't really want to be restricting your draft space, especially because this looks like a pretty deep draft at the moment going into 2025. And so I'd prefer not to lose like a second round pick just for Pete Alonso or Santander. But yeah, it would improve the Major League roster in 2025. I kind of would prefer this. Like, I've been looking at Hassan Kim all offseason and thinking it would be worth trying to get him to come play third base. I would have liked that better as like their sort of big leadoff type acquisition, a bit more than Jonathan India, just because Kim actually gives you something defensively, and I think he has a more sustainable sort of OBP profile than India. But you can still go get him and then just
Yeah, I mean, you can have
trade away
There's
Michael
room for both
Garcia.
of
I'm
them.
out on him anyway.
Fair enough.
I see Michael's still cheap, and I love him as a utility guy with the speed and the glove. I think he fits really well on the bench.
Yeah, I'm fine with him sticking around as a bench guy. I don't have an issue with that.
Yeah, I don't think many fans would have an issue.
And I mean, if he's the starting third baseman and Melendez and Renfroe are the starting corner outfielders at the beginning of the year, I think that is a failure, an absolute failure by the Royals front office. But I also don't think that will happen. There's still time. There's still guys.
I think that's a pretty fair bar to set. Greg, back to Santander before we move on. So I was in the same camp with, I was worried about Santander's, bat playing in Kauffman Stadium. And I'm writing a piece over surprisingly the top bat that's performed in Kauffman over the past 5 years. That's not a Royals player. Santander is actually second on balls in play. He has a 328 WRC plus in Kauffman Stadium. Now the number one guy has a 399 WRC plus in that same metric. I'm not going to spoil my article at all, but you definitely couldn't guess who the frick it is. I mean, I'm not saying Santander would be perfect in Kauffman. He was definitely more reliant upon home runs last year with the Orioles, which is a concern, but he succeeded here before. Maybe he could put a few more in the fountains and be that middle of the order bat that we have so hoped for. The front office is talking about so much. Jeremy also brought up Annie Rogers. Maybe she has a critical piece, but we will also hear from her this coming week on the podcast. She will be joining Jeremy and I for our Wednesday evening recording. You could hear that on Thursday morning, wherever you get your podcast. Just make sure you subscribe or follow so you don't miss that episode. Plus, coming up next Wednesday, we will have Meg Rowley of the Effectively Wild podcast joining us. If you heard of Effectively Wild, you know it's from Fangraphs. We absolutely love Fangraphs and that team over there and what they are doing. Greg, I feel like there was something else that you wanted to talk about with the Royals, and now I'm blanking on it, man. Am I just crazy?
I had a little bit where I was going to go through the Royals promotional calendar and see if there was anything interesting there, but they haven't released any images yet of like, the shirts and the hats and such that they're giving away. So I'll have to wait on that and see if they come up with anything more interesting than what's already on there.
But there was another team's bobblehead that we wanted to talk about, because this is so self-serving that I couldn't imagine if my favorite team did this. Greg, tell us about this crazy bobblehead,
the Baltimore
please.
Orioles have actually released all of their imagery and stuff for their promotional schedule. And on April 19th, those Orioles will be hosting the Cincinnati Reds, and the first 15,000 fans into the gates of Camden Yards will be able to get a bobblehead of Orioles owner David Rubenstein. In this bobblehead, he's wearing like khakis and a shirt and tie, basically belt and dress shoes, with like an Orioles jacket over the shirt and tie. And he's like holding up a hat, I guess he is giving away. This is like, I compared this to, I think it was last year, the year before, the Nationals gave away a bobblehead of their general manager, Mike Rizzo. This is the next step up from that, a bobblehead of the owner. And like, let's just be clear, owning a baseball team is a vanity project for these guys, right? And so this perfectly fits. It's like the owner's like, I could give away a bobblehead of myself. Yeah, why not? it's bold for a guy that hasn't actually won anything as the owner of the team yet. They made one playoff appearance and went 2-barbecue against the Royals. So bold look, I will say. I am not going to be, trying to get out there and get this bobblehead myself. I don't know if anybody else will be.
He hasn't even done the one thing that fans celebrate team owners for: spend money. What free agents have the Orioles brought in this year?
I have heard allegedly that Rubenstein wants to spend and Mike Elias is undermining him in the front office.
Stop.
Yeah,
I know, you're the owner. Yeah. You get to make that. I know what.
Mike Elias is determined to build a contending team only from within without any sort of outside players at all. And he's so committed to that bit that Charlie Morton and Tyler O'Neill are the big fans.
Santander and Corbin Burns.
Yeah, which they did not do. I mean, Jeremy, I just want to hear about this bobblehead though, because this is such a trivial thing, but that the team's marketing department is not coming up with that idea on their own. Like there has to be like some nudging, some elbow pushing and winking from the top saying like, hey, this guy wants his own bobblehead. It just seems so
absolutely
self-serving.
Let me tell you a story, Jacob. Last year I went to a Royals game in Atlanta, the last series of the season, and they had a bobblehead giveaway where they were just giving away every leftover bobblehead they had from every promotion. And my dad and I went to that game, and I got I think it was Michael Harris as Spider-Man bobblehead, and he got a Matt Olson bobblehead. And so that was pretty cool. And then these kids went up to us and were like, hey, can we trade for your bobbleheads? I'll trade you this one. And I was just like, listen, I don't need this bobblehead. You're a little kid. I'll just give you my bobblehead. And then I gave him my dad's bobblehead too, because I forgot that it wasn't mine. But my dad didn't care, so it was fine. So I just gave these bobbleheads away. If someone came to me and was like, let me trade you the Orioles owner's bobblehead for your bobblehead, I would be like, no. And even though you're a 6-year-old kid, I'm not even giving you this bobblehead because I'm so offended that you tried to trade me that bobblehead. No, that's not true. I would feel so bad for the kid. I would give him the bobblehead again. But come on, no one wants that.
Nah, I mean, do you think that's the case, Greg? No one wants this bobblehead,
aside from like hardcore bobblehead collectors, yeah, I don't know who would. A question I'd like to pose for both of you: what would be the funniest bobblehead for somebody within the Royals organization they could give away?
Dayton Moore,
funniest,
especially because he's not in the organization anymore.
Yeah,
exactly. Oh, let's see, the funniest within the org.
Yeah, they should do like a Trevor Vance bobblehead, have him like a lawnmower or something.
No, that one would actually be cool though. At least Trevor Vance does something.
What about Vance Wilson? What about Vance Wilson? Would that probably be the most unpopular? Yeah, exactly. Instead of his head, it's a bobble arm.
I'd like to see like Bill Duplessis have him like at a computer or something.
Oh my gosh! Or like
all of these are significantly better bobbleheads than the ones the Orioles are handing out. Come on,
man, we should be getting paid for this, shouldn't we? Man, but yeah, it is. Listen, I love bobbleheads though. I think it's one of the cheesiest and most like traditional baseball giveaways though, alongside with T-shirts. So cool that you got a bobblehead, but you got to be creative on your subject matter, if you will. But thanks for bringing that up, Greg. I can't wait to see what the Royals final promotional schedule looks like, because I feel like they're like adding stuff up until like March. Like it's pretty late when it gets finalized.
Stuff in there, right? Now it's the 10-year anniversary of 2015. They did 2014.
They do have various things they've already announced that are like commemorating both the 2015 teams and the 1985 teams, since 40-year anniversary of that as well.
Yeah.
So obviously they're taking advantage of that. Yeah, I think there's promotions that even announced during the season too. Like, yeah, it takes time.
Gotta have a Moose bobblehead or something.
They do have a Moose bobblehead, I think.
That'd be cool.
Again, they haven't released the
images yet. Get my hand on
don't know what they actually look like, but we'll get there eventually. It's just, if you're gonna be the owner, put out a bobblehead, I feel like you have to actually ingratiate yourself to the fan base first. Like, I think there might be a few owners.
Would be a
like,
start.
If the Mets did like a Steve Cohen bobblehead, I think fans might get behind that. Like John Middleton for the Phillies, like I think he could. Peter Seidler, while he was still around, probably could have done one. But yeah, for a guy that's on the team for 1 year and hasn't accomplished anything, yeah, that's tough.
I feel like there's not a whole lot of fan.
No, I think I just named all of them
anymore. Yeah, I think you did.
Are the fans in New York really happy with Cohen? Because they haven't
Yeah,
won
but they got
anything,
Soto.
even though he's spending all that
Man,
money.
he's spending money,
Yeah.
baby. That's about it.
You have to spend money and win, don't you?
He got to the NLCS
Yes.
last year.
That you do. That's true. That's
Or
farther than the Royals have gotten in a while.
On April 26th against the Astros, the Royals will give away a 2015 Mike Moustakas bobblehead. I don't have an image of that yet.
My 2014 bobblehead, it's not from 2014. I don't remember what year it came out. I have a Mike Moustakas bobblehead where he's leaning over the dugout to catch that fly ball from the 2014.
ALCS, yeah.
I think it was the ALCS, yeah. That's the only bobblehead I display anywhere because Mike is my favorite player, and that's a cool bobblehead. Like, it's unique design. So I will probably have to see if I can get my hands on the Moustakas bobblehead from this year somehow, even though I don't go to Royals games, just because it's Moose. But yeah, you know what I'm not collecting is a John Sherman bobblehead.
Pass on that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would. I'd be giving that away to a
Even
kid
if
there at the
John
game.
Sherman goes out and signs Profar, Bregman, and Santander, even if he's like, screw it, I'm fixing all three of these positions immediately with all the money, I would still not buy a John Sherman bobblehead.
I don't know if he did that, that'd get a lot of fans to his side, Jeremy. I will
Well,
say
they can
that.
have the bobblehead. I'm gonna sit that one out.
Fair enough. All right, guys. Listen, I don't have anything else Royals related to talk about today. Why don't we get to some Royals reviews?
We didn't want to talk about Arenado at all.
No, hell
all
no.
Right.
Because no. Okay, so peek behind the curtain. I was telling folks this. I thought this Arenado stuff was news at first, and then like I actually sat down and got realistic with myself, talked myself out of it being news. I mean, let me go ahead and set the stage and do the actual good thing. So, Kansas City Royals, they apparently checked in on Nolan Arenado at winter meetings about his trade availability. Now, Arenado, St. Louis Cardinals third baseman, one of the more notable tradable players, or so we once thought. He has a full no trade clause, so he can squash any trade deal, and he's already done so this offseason. He ixnayed a deal down to the Houston Astros, who I thought would be like, they're a fairly competitive team and they'll get it done. Okay, that's not bad. Well, they are, but that's because they kind of set a high bar for themselves and they're trending downwards from it. But Arenado, a St. Louis Cardinals beat writer, specifically named Kansas City as a team that he believed had checked in on Arenado. And I was like, well, maybe that's the middle of the order bat. We need to upgrade at third base. Maybe there's something there. But the money and Arenado's bat's trending in the wrong direction. Like, Greg, do you have any thoughts on this? I don't know if Arenado's the ultimate solution or would be worth the $27 million he's due in 2025.
He is a fit in the sense that he is a Major League Baseball player that plays third base, which is a need for the Royals. I don't think he's a good fit as a middle of the order bat because I kind of think he's washed. Like, he's never really had elite batted ball metrics or elite plate discipline or anything. He's always been a guy that just got the most out of what he could do on the field. But as those start to slip even further, I just don't know. Like, I don't know what sort of adjustments that he can make to kind of make up for his physical tools declining as he heads into his age 34 season. He's been basically a league average bat over the past 2 years with kind of batted ball metrics and such under the hood that are a little bit worse than that. And so I don't think he's going to get back to being like that 30 homer middle of the order hitter guy again. Like, I think those days are behind him. So no, I don't really see him as a middle of the order bat at this point.
Yeah, he, in the same way that Santander would be an upgrade in the outfield, regardless of, you know, how many fewer home runs he hits for Kauffman in Kauffman Stadium. Arenado would be an upgrade at third base, but he's not a good value, and I was hoping for something more I honestly, I'd rather have Taylor Ward than Arenado at this point in his career, I think.
Ward.
And you still have to give up prospect capital to the Cardinals to get Arenado. Like, it just doesn't seem like a good fit for a supposedly cash-strapped Royals franchise, and there are other spots where they can improve the
I
order,
don't
like you
actually
both
think
said.
he's going to
So
get that much
I don't
back
know.
in
I'm out on
prospects
it.
given the contract.
I will I would hope not. It doesn't make much sense for any organization out there to give up, say, a top 10 prospect in their system for Arenado. But the Cardinals, I mean, they weren't terrible last year. I think they still finished off with 82 wins, if I
83.
recall correctly. Like they
83.
can, what'd you say? 83. Thank you. They can, that's still a roster you can squint and see, like, okay, well, if certain things in the NL Central go their way, maybe they are a playoff team. So if they're going to get a minuscule return, they might just end up holding on to Arenado and skimping in other areas. That's what I think they would do, and that's why I think the overall trade chatter surrounding him is slowed down to just a grinding
Well,
halt.
and he's also rejected trades, I think we were discussing ahead of time, to the Red Sox and to the Astros. And I swear I read somewhere that when the Royals what I saw was when the Royals called about him, the Cardinals said it doesn't even make sense to talk. He's going to reject a trade to you. So it sounds like Arenado really doesn't want to leave St. Louis. So I think he's going to stay in St. Louis because they can't get him to waive his no trade clause.
I think the
Hey, that's
Cardinals
his own
would
doing.
rather not have him around anymore just because it would kind of make their roster fit together better. I think they'd really like to move Jordan Walker back to third base because, him in the outfield, not a very good look. But yeah,
Can they move Arenado to
No.
I
first?
guess you could, but then you're like Arenado is still a very good defensive third baseman, and so I don't think he would really accept moving
Yeah.
to first base. And like you're definitely not getting the best value out of him if you move him there.
Yeah.
Right, like I think most guys, this is at the point in their career where you would have them, look at moving to a DH full time or to first base. Well, Arenado, he was still worth 9 outs above average in 2024, 95th, percentile in MLB. So like that's really good value at third base. And if the bat's on the decline, well, how are you going to salvage what he brings to your team? That's a keep him at third base. But like Greg said, that's at the detriment to the rest of the Cardinals roster and their just overall prospect depth. Because if you go look at that system, him being at third base is such a logjam to their third base prospects, their outfield because of Walker and all these other guys that they're trying out in the outfield. It's an insane situation that, frankly, I forget who had the piece up on Royals Review this weekend about the Royals being the better baseball team in Missouri than the
That
Cardinals
was
now.
our
Like
very
that's just the truth.
Colin Jekyll wrote that. Yeah, the Royals have overtaken the Cardinals as Missouri's better baseball team, and I mean, there's a good point because the Cardinals are kind of in a weird spot right now given the composition of their roster. There's not a clear path forward for them at the moment, even though they're in a very winnable division.
Yeah, exactly. The NL Central is such a, I don't know. The Brewers will always win that division somehow, I guess.
Turns out the AL Central's really tough, or at least it was last year.
I still like the Cubs,
You know
but
what
I
else
like them last
we
year
forgot
too,
to talk
so.
about? We
What else we forget about?
we mentioned the NRIs, but we were going to discuss. I think we even said we were going to discuss. Are any of these guys going to make the roster? And we didn't do that.
Well, and so I'll go and kick us off here. I don't foresee any of these guys making the 26-man roster. There's definitely guys that I think would make the roster better, and I would absolutely love to see at the major league level, but they're just like a year away. Like Steven Zobak, Tyson Guerrero, these are pitchers that definitely have something to offer, but just not at the start of 2025. And then Javier Vaz, he's going to give you something. He is really a super utility guy, but is the bat ready? We don't know yet. And I don't know. I just want to see Gavin Cross actually have a good spring down in Arizona. But all in all, I don't see any of these guys breaking camp with the Royals. What about you, Greg?
Maybe some of the bullpen arms, or at least one of them, like one of Taylor Clark or Junior Fernandez or like an Anthony Simonelli or something. But yeah, I really don't see most of these guys anything more than like minor league depth.
Gavin Cross is the one guy I'll be keeping an eye on just because the outfield situation is so dire that even if they add one bat, if he has a really good spring, they could use another.
Yeah.
So he's a guy I'll be keeping an eye on. I don't necessarily expect him to. Caglione will not. Mitchell will not. Mitchell probably won't be up at all in 2025. 2026 would be the earliest I think you could look at seeing Mitchell get to the big leagues. Now, when the Royals drafted Caglione, some people were saying he could reach the big leagues this year. We were having actually a discussion in the Royals Review writer chat about whether he might make the roster this year. He did. In the newsletter that Annie Rogers put out saying Caglione was invited to spring training, she mentioned that he will not be pitching in 2025 in an attempt to advance through the minor leagues faster, which made me think that the Royals really might be trying to push him to the big leagues this year if they can. And also in that article was that if things go well at first base and if he's hitting well, they might try him in the outfield because he would need positional versatility to advance through the minor leagues quickly. So I was just wondering if what you guys take on that is. Do you think Caglione could be in the big leagues this year? Do you think he'll ever pitch again? Or is he done pitching now?
I don't think he will ever pitch again. I kind of thought that when he was drafted, I know he was announced as a two-way player, but I think you just let him hit. The pitching can be like a backup plan if everything somehow goes wrong. I don't think he will or should be in the major leagues this year because he finished last year at high A and he wasn't exactly destroying high A. Like, I'd rather cut him loose at Northwest Arkansas for a little bit and let him earn his way up. My thinking, though, is I think there's some heat on Vinny Pasquantino now because he's been pretty regularly injured throughout his major league career, a lot of shoulder issues. And since that really promising half season in 2022, he hasn't really lived up to that offensively in the past 2 years. Like I mentioned, dealt with injuries, sure, but he has a 106 WRC plus combined over the last 2 seasons. And for a guy that's a first base only,
a top 3 hitter in the
I
Royals
understand
lineup.
that, but for a guy that's a first baseman only, which is also Caglione's position, Pasquantino is the guy that's blocking Caglione basically, especially if we're expecting Salvador Perez to continue getting regular at-bats as the designated hitter. And so at some point, he's got to start hitting, and he's about to get into arbitration. And so I would hope that at some point your first baseman starts to be a little bit better than just barely above league average.
I mean, that would be optimal, but yeah, you have a point, Greg. Maybe it is time that we start talking about Vinny Pasquantino a little bit more, because if I recall correctly, he had a slower start to 2024 too, right? Like I think there was a little bit of frustration with him at that point. Then he had a pretty hot spring and into the summer.
He's 27 right now. He should be smack dab in his prime. And so I'm really looking to him as a guy that can hopefully look a bit more like he did as a rookie when he was showing elite plate discipline and really good batted ball metrics, but just haven't really continued over the past couple of years.
Hopefully so. Jeremy, any thoughts on that before we move on?
Nope. I think, well, I take that back. I think Vinny's got a nose for RBIs, and I think that's important. And I think we're going to see him. He was doing fairly well last year until, he got the thumb injury, which is not related to the shoulder. So the shoulder hopefully is fixed now. It's stable, hopefully. And I really do hope that he's going to have a full year this year. And hopefully with most of a season under his belt and then coming back in the playoffs, he won't have the ramp up period that he had last year, which some people attributed to not having played baseball for almost a year due to that shoulder injury. So I have hopes. We'll see. I do think, if he doesn't have a good year, you do have to start asking those questions where instead of the question that I think a lot of people were asking before that second shoulder injury was, can we extend Vinny Pasquantino? The question might be, do we non-tender Vinny Pasquantino?
Yeah, best case scenario, Vinny insane. Has like a 130 work plus this year. Cags crushes it in the minors, and then you have a good problem on your hands at that point.
Absolutely. It is it's a gluttony of talent there. It's a very niche talent, though. You have a first base only hitting from the left side. Like that's
very different profiles.
Just how it is. Too. Yes, very different profiles. Very, very different profiles. I like Caglione's in Kauffman Stadium a little bit more, though, I will say. But that's a discussion for another time. Going to go ahead and get on out here with some Royals reviews. Greg, please start us off this evening.
My review is going to be Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I'm not a big-time gamer, but I have been playing that on Xbox over the past week or so, and it's really quite enjoyable. Like, if you're into sort of adventure puzzle games, then it's very much up your alley, because there's not like, it's a first person game without really a whole lot of combat, and most of the combat you do is hand to hand. And so It is a really funny aspect of it. Is like, wow, I'm really glad that these Nazi soldiers are just trying to punch me to death instead of shooting me with the rifles that they're carrying. And so that's very advantageous for Indiana Jones. But yeah, puzzle-based game. I'm really enjoying it so far. It's a very compelling story that fits right in with what you'd expect from an Indiana Jones movie without a lot of the racism that some of the old Indiana Jones movies had. So it's good. It's on Game Pass if you have that on Xbox or PC. So would definitely recommend giving it a shot.
All right. I like it. My review, actually, you know what? I'm going to cede to Jeremy real quick. Jeremy, do you got a review for us?
First, let me just say that I've heard really good things about the Indiana Jones game, and punching Nazis is always a good time. And I'm about to need a new game to play, so maybe I'll look at that next. Certainly, it is on my list. I'm very excited about that, and I love. Ever since I saw the first trailer with Troy Baker doing his best Harrison Ford impersonation, I was like, man, that's a good impersonation. Really. Yeah, so I'm really excited to try that game, and you enjoying it just makes me more excited. So I will keep with kind of the George Lucas theme, and also the theme of Star Wars from earlier. I finished my first Platinum Trophy of 2025 yesterday. I said I was going to review a different game, but, we're on the theme. So Star Wars Outlaws was a Ubisoft game that came out last year, and finally got around to playing it in the new year. It has really fun characters, and the main story missions and the DLC missions, and even some of the side missions, like the side missions that they fleshed out a little bit more, are really interesting and fun gameplay. At least now. I'm obviously playing it after there was a lot of pushback about the stealth elements, and they had to revamp some of that stuff. But now I found it to be really fun. Now, the tertiary side stuff that's like, oh, you heard about this droid that's off in a canyon fighting pirates, it ends up being really dull. A lot of the like map markers in true Ubisoft fashion are just like, show up, blast some things, open a box, and call it a day. And it's just like, okay, that wasn't all that fun. But the characters are really fun. The story is fine. And the gameplay, there's really some really strong pieces there. They just needed to maybe edit some, I think. Like, you don't have to do Ubisoft open world stuff, I promise. You can have less content and just make the content you have better. It is a game that I don't know that I super recommend, but if you're into Star Wars or it does sound remotely good, you should try it, because I think you'll find things to like in it. The Nyx character, the little pet of the main character, is adorable, and her whole like team of thieves is great. So I'm hoping this one gets a sequel, because I think a sequel could be significantly better and build on the strengths of this game and maybe lose some of the weaknesses. But we'll have to see.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much of a Ubisoft game is this Ubisoft game?
Gosh, I would say it's a solid 6 or 7. It is not fully in like Assassin's Creed, like climb towers and there's 2,000 collectibles. Like, they did edit some, which I appreciate, because I definitely get overwhelmed by Ubisoft open worlds. This one there's 5 different planets you can go to, and 2 of them are really kind of limited. So some people are going to look at that and go, well, that's not a lot of space to explore. And I'm like, okay, there's still too much for me, but I can almost handle it. So take that for what it is. I'm trying to describe it in a way that if you're listening to this, you can make your own opinion rather than saying this is good or bad. I think it was pretty close to the right size. I just would have, like I said, I would have edited that down some. There's a lot of open space to traverse, and the speeder bike is not fun. So there's that. Hopefully they fix that in a sequel. But the Wildcard DLC barely uses the speeder bike at all. That's their first story DLC they released. I played that today. It barely uses the speeder bike at all, and it's fantastic. So there's some really strong stuff here. The open world is not too open. It's not just space for the sake of space always. They did edit some, and I think they're moving in a good direction.
All right, that's always good to hear, because I know the Assassin's Creed elements bleeding over into other franchises was a big point of critique for that development company. So I'm all here for it. I got a quick review. COTS Contracts, if you guys haven't heard of it, it's under the Baseball Prospectus umbrella. It gives you a pretty good insight into each team's payroll and how their contracts are looking, and overall just rankings. A lot of history there too. I was digging in deeper there, and like, they have all the CBAs dating back to 1970. Like, if that's something you're interested in or just learning in how things have progressed, definitely go check out Cott's contracts. I started looking at it because I don't know what I'm missing here, but roster resource on Fangraphs is saying like final payroll for 2025 for the Royals is at 123. Meanwhile, Cots is saying 110. So it's a massive gap right now that I need to dive into. But thankfully, at least with Cots, I can go see how the numbers all stack up and what I'm missing, frankly. All right, guys, anything else before we get on out of here?
Yeah, one more thing, actually, Jacob. You're wearing a
Ooh.
Phillies shirt on a Royals podcast. What exactly are you thinking?
Listen, I'll say this. If they send it to me, I'm going to wear it. All right?
Phillies sent you that?
Yeah. Long time ago.
Do we have thoughts on the
far, far away.
Jesus Luzardo trade that you want to get off your chest?
No, nothing I want to get off my chest there. Jeremy, what about you?
I don't even know what that trade was. I know I saw it, but I was like, it doesn't affect the Royals. I'm blanking it out right now.
If that name sounds familiar to our listeners, it's because I remember that what they talked about, a 1-for-1 swap for Jesus and Vinny last offseason or the offseason before, I think it was. Last offseason.
And then they signed Waka instead.
I mean, Greg, what do you think about that trade? I think the Phillies made a decent trade there.
They have some pretty insane starting pitching depth over there.
It is pretty nice over there. Good spot to be in the NL East right now if you want to watch some good baseball, apparently.
Whoa, Jacob. Hey, everybody,
hey, man,
I know the Royals
just love baseball.
made the playoffs and even won their first series, but go watch the Phillies. On a Royals podcast.
I'm just saying the NL East. I'm just saying the NL East. Okay, all right. Well, we will talk to Max. We'll get an actual competent co-host for you, Jeremy. But for now, I guess that'll do it for the end of my time at Royals Rundown. Wow. What an anticlimactic end. If you want to follow along with us on social media, you could do so. I'm going to go cry in the corner. But my name is Jacob Milham. Greg, thank you again for joining us. Make sure you go check out Greg's podcast. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you can find it. And that's going to do it for us.
Flips and Infield Shifts.
Thank you. Truth be told, Greg, I always switch it around in my head, so I didn't want to say it wrong. I'd highly doubt it. Have you heard how I pronounce some players' names on this podcast? It is not close at all. It is. It is certainly a journey. All right, we're gonna go get on out of here. Thank you so much for joining us, and until next time, go Royals.
Phillies.